Hello everybody. Since it's almost New Year, I thought it was an opportunity to do a special poetry reading about New Year, for poetry changes lives. Certain times of the year seem to inspire an awful lot of people to write poems. Christmas is one, Midsummer's Day, and of course New Year as well. Just about every poet in the last few hundred years has somehow felt moved. I sometimes seems to write a poem about the new year. I thought I'd read one or two, or extracts anyway, just to give you a flavour of what I mean. Poetry comes in so many wonderful varieties. I think I'll start with a little haiku, which of course you probably know is a Japanese three-line poem, usually just 17 syllables. Here's one from Basho. New Year's Day, sun on every field is beloved. Just that. Just makes you think. The haiku has, so good haiku has the ability in just a very few words to sort of crystallize a whole idea. And I think Basho is saying there, don't expect too much. Just be grateful for what you have. And that's my kind of theme. New Year's Day often gives rise to big emotions and big celebrations too, of course. The first thing to say about it, of course, is that it's all an illusion. The years come round in a circle and the circle repeats itself. But in any circle, there's no beginning and no end. We have just chosen a point in time in the circle of the planets to say this is where the circle starts. But of course, the circle is eternal. Time, paradoxically, may be eternal, but time has elements that have a beginning and an end, though, again, they're mostly sort of artificially imposed by us. Nevertheless, it's in our nature, I think, to kind of expect beginnings and endings. And that's very much a theme of a lot of poetry. Here's one I'm going to read by that very good and famous, perhaps more in his time than now, late 18th, early 19th century poet John Clare, who was a very simple man, born, I think, the son of an agricultural labourer. He sort of educated himself and wrote some beautiful, simple poetry. And much of his poems are words of one syllable, really, but they produce beautiful imagery and very, very sometimes wise thoughts as well. Here's his well-known poem, The Old Year. The old year's gone away to nothingness and night. We cannot find him all the day, nor hear him in the night. He left no footstep, mark or place, in either shade or sun. The last year he'd a neighbour's face, in this he's known by none. All nothing everywhere, mists we on mornings see, have more of substance when they're here, and more of form than he. He was a friend to every fire, in every cotton hall, a guest to every heart's desire, and now he's naught at all. Old papers thrown away, old garments cast aside, the talk of yesterday are things identified. But time once turned away, no voices can recall. The eve of New Year's Day, left the old year lost to all. Just a fairly sort of factual, rather slightly wistful poem about the coming of one year and the going of another, the old one. You know, everyone likes to make resolutions at New Year's time, and it's not a bad thing to do, I think, as long as you don't sort of make an impossible goal and then torture yourself for not achieving it. I think my resolution this year is going to be to manage expectations. So much, looking back on my life, so much of my life has been causing myself unhappiness by having unrealistic expectations or trying to meet the expectations of others. And I love that the Gestalt prayer written by the well-known psychologist Fritz Perls. It goes like this: I do my thing and you do yours. I am not here to meet your expectations and you are not here to meet mine. If we meet, then that is beautiful, but if not, it can't be helped. In other words, we have to take life as it comes and not try to manage our lives by setting ourselves goals and expecting things of others either. And I'm going to read another haiku, this time by the wonderful Japanese poet Basho, who is still, of course, greatly revered in Japan. And he writes, he has a real gift for haiku, and I just think the way he crystallizes thoughts and truths into just 4 or 5, 6 or 7 words is absolutely stunning and really makes me sometimes think or gasp or laugh. I very much like this about the new year. Year after year, on the monkey's face, a monkey's face. I think that says it all. Year after year, on the monkey's face, a monkey's face. And that's about expectations, I think, very much. We must accept certain things as they are and not expect things to change. We can do our best to change the things we can, but we cannot expect things to change just because we want them to. And expectations and perceptions are attitudes that sometimes cause so much self-inflicted pain and unhappiness. I'm going to read now a very fine poem by Thomas Hardy, who I think is one of England's greatest poets. He's, of course, also known as a novelist. He wrote Tess of the d'Urbervilles and The Mill on the Floss and other great books. But the latter part of his life, he stopped writing novels and decided he was just going to be a poet. And I love this poem, The Darkling Thrush, that has an air of sadness about it, but also an element of hope as well. It's extremely beautiful. Again, wonderful imagery and just use of words. Some Hardy liked sort of inventing little words as well. And there are 1 or 2 in this that are invented, I think. Here we are, The Darkling Thrush. I leant upon a coppice gate when frost was spectre grey, and winter's dregs made desolate the weakening eye of day. The tangled vine stems scored the sky like strings of broken lyres, and all mankind that haunted nigh had sought their household fires. The land's sharp features seemed to be the century's corpse outlent, his crypt the cloudy canopy, the wind his death lament. The ancient pulse of germ and birth was shrunken hard and dry, and every spirit upon earth seemed fervorless as I. At once a voice arose among the bleak twigs overhead, in a full-hearted evensong of joy illimited. An aged thrush, frail, gaunt, and small, in blast-beruffled plume, had chosen thus to fling his soul upon the glowing gloom. So little cause for carolings of such ecstatic sound was written on terrestrial things afar or nigh around, that I could think there trembled through his happy good-night air some blessed hope whereof he knew and I was unaware. That's Thomas Hardy, always a thoughtful poet, really thinking about so much sort of negativity in the old year, but looking forward to new things in an element of hope, like hoping the thrush knew something that he, Thomas Hardy, did not. Well, that's a nice conceit, I think. From the almost sublime to the almost ridiculous, I love this poem by Ogden Nash, one of the wittiest wordsmiths to come out of America in the 20th century. I think he was a sort of a advertising executive in his day job, but he wrote some brilliant, very short poems usually, and this one's a great example, a poem for the new year. It's called Good Riddance, but now what? Here we are. Come, children, gather round my knee, something is about to be. Tonight's December 31st. Something is about to burst. The clock is crouching, dark and small, like a time bomb in the hall. Hark, it's midnight, children dear. Duck, here comes another year. Such a great take on the new year. He often wrote for children, and they must have loved it when he came around to visit. He had kids of his own too, and it must have been great to be around him. Ogden Nash, such a wonderful place. Well, next I'm going to read and just an extract from Christina Rossetti's very beautiful poem, Ditties on, what did she call it? She called it Ditties on Old and New Year Ditties. And it starts like this. New Year met me somewhat sad, Old Year leaves me tired, stripped of favourite things I had, balked of much desired. Yet further on my road today, God willing, farther on my way, New Year coming on apace, what have you to give me? Bring you scathe or bring you grace? Face me with an honest face. You shall not deceive me. Be it good or ill, be it what you will, it needs shall help me on my road, my rugged way to heaven, please God. It goes on for several verses, for example. Christina Rossetti never fails to please, I find. She can be a bit mournful, but she just writes such very, very beautiful words, puts them together in the most felicitous of order. What about another lady poet, Sylvia Plath? You can guarantee she'll have a different take on the new year from the likes of Wordsworth and Tennyson and even Thomas Hardy. What do you think of this? This is quite different. She wrote this when she was living briefly on Dartmoor. She'd been married to Ted Hughes for some time, and they'd had their first child, and the child was a baby, and Sylvia Plath, I think, was probably alone on Dartmoor in the midst of winter. New Year's Day just arrived, and she wrote this little poem, New Year on Dartmoor. This is newness, every little tawdry, obstacle, glass-wrapped and peculiar, glinting and clinking in a saint's falsetto. I think she meant the frost on the ground. Only you don't know what to make of the sudden slippiness, the blind, white, awful, inaccessible slant. There's no getting up it by words, you know. No getting up by elephant, or wheel, or shoe. We have only come to look. You are too new to want the world in a glass hat. I picture her standing, looking outside at the Dartmoor hills, all covered in frost and maybe snow, holding her tiny baby and saying to it, you are too new to want the world in a glass hat. Such a insightful, creative, highly original poet, Sylvia Plath. Such a tragic life, but so much beauty in the relatively few words she was able to write in her short life. Well, from that sort of sparkling originality to Philip Larkin, the poet who once said, disappointment was to him what daffodils had been to Wordsworth. He was the poet of disappointment and disillusion, and he sort of revelled in it. He was probably a very witty man if you actually met him in a pub, and he was quite fond of going to pubs. But his poetry is very characterised by disillusion and disappointment. He wrote this poem called December 1940. I'm not going to read it all, but I'll read the beginning. It sets the scene of a cold, wet winter streets and a town on New Year's Eve. The short afternoon ends and the year is over. Above trees at the end of the garden, the sky is unchanged. An endless sky and the wet streets as ever, between standing houses, are empty and unchallenged. From roads where men go home, I walk apart. The buses bearing their loads away from works, through the dust, the bicycles coming home from bricks. There, evening like a derelict lorry is alone and mute. These houses are deserted, felt over smashed windows, no milk on the step, a note pinned to the door telling of departure, only shadows. Move when in the day the sun is seen for an hour. Yet to me this decaying landscape has its uses, to make me remember who am always inclined to forget, that there is always a changing at the root and a real world in which time really passes. And it ends like this. So it is better to sleep and leave the bottle unopened. Tomorrow in the offices, the year on the stamps will be altered. Tomorrow new diaries consulted, new calendars stand. With such small adjustments, life will again move forward, implicating us all, and the voice of the living be heard. It is to us that you should turn your straying attention, us who need you and are affected by your fortune, us you should love and to whom you should give your word. That's Philip Larkin's take on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. That was written during World War II, incidentally. Deserted houses as a result of evacuees, that sort of thing. Well, there we are. It remains for me to wish you all a very happy New Year, and thank you for your support to me over the past year. I hope you've enjoyed these poetry readings. I'm going to end with another haiku. I think this one, it's either by Basho or by Issa, also another very famous Japanese poet. New Year's morning, the ducks on the pond quack and quack. Keep that image in your head. The ducks in the pond, on the pond, quack and quack. Have a great New Year. I wish you all the best.